Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, "Neighbor Steals My Land and Builds a Legal Swimming Pool on My Property While I'm Gone." My wife and I always look forward to our annual trip to our native town back in India. We get to eat flavorful food that makes the food we get back here seem bland, and we get to meet our parents. However, the best part about taking a month-long trip to a faraway country is the fact that we won't have to deal with Derek and his family, who seem hell-bent on making our lives miserable. Derek was our neighbor from the time we moved into our new house 20 years back. He and his wife, Carla, seemed to be despised by the entire neighborhood, and it didn't take long to understand why. It isn't uncommon to find their trash bags dumped over our common fence. When asked about it, Derek would always say they'd never dump trash by the fence because it was their fence and they'd technically be littering on their own property. This made zero sense to me, but I soon learned that it was pointless arguing with a man that refused to listen. His son, Alan, was only 11 when we first moved in, so we assumed his arrogant behavior would pass once he attained some maturity, but even after entering his 30s, he remains a pain that the entire neighborhood is forced to endure. He's obnoxiously loud and violent, which makes it hard for him to keep a job and be able to move out of his parents' house. His wife was the type of person who'd start rumors about the other people who lived on the street for no real reason. My wife often complains to me about how Carla always sits by the porch to judge people. She watches everything like a hawk and never allows people an ounce of privacy. The worst of them all was Derek. He's the kind of man that's extremely short-tempered and thinks he's entitled to everything in the world. He's the reason that the other neighbors were never able to form a community. Every single gathering that took place, he would insert himself into it regardless of whether or not he was invited. He'd then proceed to get into a fight, which usually turned physical. Eventually, everyone just decided to not have gatherings, however big or small the occasion. This seemed much easier than having to deal with Derek. This year, after our month-long vacation, my wife and I were rather excited to go back home due to the new opportunities that awaited her at her workplace. There was still a slight disappointment in my heart that we'd have to go back to living next door to Derek's family, but nothing prepared me for what was waiting back home. We came back to find a giant hole dug up on our front lawn, and a couple of construction workers seemed to be lining the hole with cement. I rushed over immediately to get them to stop, but they said they were instructed by the landowner to finish building a pool within the end of this week. I was shocked at this statement because I was the landowner and I had asked for no such thing. I wasn't even here for a month, so that was obviously impossible. After probing further, I discovered that they were hired by Derek. He had told them the land was his, so they had been working on it for the past 3 weeks and the pool was close to completion. I was absolutely furious and headed toward Derek's house, but my wife stopped me and told me it was better to go to the police directly. I realized this was smarter because, knowing Derek, he was definitely not going to listen to a single thing I said. When the workers saw that we had the keys that opened our house, they believed that the property was in fact ours and decided to clear out the area till this matter was resolved. They weren't too worried about not being paid for their work because the payment had already been completed. This just made me angrier because it showed the confidence with which Derek had decided that our front yard was his. We called the police and informed them of what had happened. Even they were rather shocked, as they had never heard of such a case before. The officer on the other end told me he would send a couple of people over to take a look at what was happening and to speak to Derek. Meanwhile, we were advised to consult a lawyer about what could be done. My sister-in-law, Aya, is an amazing lawyer, but I wasn't very clear on how to explain the situation. This was when Derek came banging at the door. He was mad that the work on the pool had been stopped. I told him how ridiculous it is that he just started constructing a whole pool in front of my house when I was on vacation, but he said the place now belongs to him according to the adverse possession law. He claimed the fence was his, and since it was on my property for over 12 years, the land now belonged to him. He was visibly getting angrier, but the cops had arrived at this point and he was forced to go back to his place and deal with it in court. I rang up Aya and she explained to me that since the property was not exactly unused by us during the 12-year duration, It would be hard for his claim to stand in court. However, there was still a risk of him being able to usurp the portion with the pool if he had really good lawyer. Our best plan of action was suing him to get the pool removed and to get a restraining order. Our lawyer was significantly better than his, so it didn't take very long for us to win this case. Derek was infuriated by the fact that he had to pay us after losing, and he made no effort to hide it. The night after the court hearing, he barged into our house with Alan by breaking the front door. They each had guns and threatened to shoot unless we agreed to let them finish the pool and use it whenever they pleased. My wife was horrified, but she agreed to their conditions if it meant they would leave us alone. They left after this with a satisfied smirk on their faces, but I was astounded that my wife just let them go. She then showed me her phone and the recording of this whole incident. Footage of Derek threatening us and damaging property combined with violating the restraining order was enough to get him locked up for a good long time. We dialed the police immediately and Derek and Alan were arrested. The whole neighborhood was relieved that they didn't have to deal with Derek anymore. There would be no more unnecessary fights and no need to restrict people from meeting each other. The best part was that I got the pool finished. He had paid the entire construction amount in the beginning, so that meant I just had to let them complete it and then I'd have a free pool in my house. We then got to celebrate being rid of Derek by having a pool party that he couldn't crash considering he was locked up. The next story is titled, "Landlord Advertises All of Our Company's Equipment for Sale to Our Competitors." Best follow our eviction to the letter. I work for a leisure company, think soft play, indoor soccer, laser tag, can't be specific. Prior to lockdown, managers and the big bosses were negotiating the renewal of the lease on one of our parks. Things were going mostly smoothly. However, the landlords were difficult to contact. Then 2020's shit hit the fan. All of our sites were closed, and everything was thrown into a mess. Negotiations began to slip down the priority list. Nobody thought the landlord would push an eviction for an expired lease during this period. Especially with it still getting rent, despite the site's closure, and the closure of every business and restaurant in the immediate area. We were wrong. A few days ago, we received a letter saying we had 7 days to leave the premises and take everything with us. We are reminded that anything left in the building after 7 days will become the landlord's property. That line is very important. Now a lot of construction goes into installing our equipment into a new building, which makes emptying one even harder. Add a lockdown, with no staff and most businesses shut, it meant that saving much of our assets would prove to be extremely difficult. To lose a profitable site and all of its assets is definitely a blow to our company. But here is where it gets worse. A few days into our 7-day eviction, we find out that the landlord has been advertising our park to our competitors. But he isn't offering just the building, he is offering all of our stuff pre-installed. Ready to go, just needs rebranding. The landlord has evicted us from the property in an attempt to increase rent and make a solid profit from our equipment installed because he thinks we won't be able to empty the park. We were furious. And here is where the malicious compliance came in. We were told we had 7 days to move everything we owned out of the property. So that's what we did. Local businesses from all around offered up free space to store our things. A few people came back out of lockdown and they all spent the rest of the week removing, selling or destroying everything that was related to us. We didn't even leave light fittings. In every other site vacation we have seen, we always end up leaving thousands of dollars worth of disco lights in the ceilings because they're too hard to get. We leave most the construction in, as well as things like the bars and kitchens that all stay intact, recognizable as what they once were, but not this building. We ripped up the flooring we installed, tore down the walls that were not part of the original structure, wooden walls to divide up the space, ripped apart our manager's offices and removed all artwork and lockers. The landlord now has every new deal he has been making dead in the water, a large renovation bill to install new flooring etc., or a company willing to do it themselves like we were. Lockdown has been extended another 4 weeks. So he has at least another 4 weeks without rent, we were paying, and won't have any potential buyers. Silver lining. The assets we got out of the site, fridges, TVs, equipment, food, tables, have all been sold, and the lack of rent and additional income has helped the business and paid staff wages. Update. We handed in the keys, and it was probably the quickest handover we've ever had. The landlord Cleary didn't want to make any kind of conversation and there was definitely an elephant in the room. But he definitely said nothing about the lack of our equipment. Complications did arise when we went to get back various deposits, but but he had no case to withhold the deposits from us as the building was in excellent shape. We had conducted much of the maintenance work ourselves, so the building was in a significantly better condition than we found it. We also cleaned up 99% of the rubbish and dirt from our demolition crusade, so he couldn't bill us for cleaning. A very minor bit of pressing from our legal team meant that we received everything owed back in full. The building is still vacant, and as of yet we don't know of any potential buyers. At this moment in time our company is still standing despite the pandemic closures and lack of business. Staff are all still employed and doing well. A huge thanks again for everyone who took the time to read this. The next story is titled, "It's Not a Swimming Pool. Not Mine but My Dad's." RIP. Subplot: he passed away 4 years ago at the age of 64. Like his father, grandfather and great-grandfather. All down the paternal line, all firstborn sons. All of different things. When I get to 64, I might start shitting bricks. Anyway, to the MC. Many years ago, it became law that all swimming pools needed to be fenced separately. The fact we lived in a fully fenced property with a gate was not enough. The swimming pool needed its own fence. Dad ignored the rule as we didn't really use the pool anymore. Approximately 30 feet long and 10 feet wide and 6 feet deep in the shape of a kidney. I swam at nationals a couple of times and my brother was able to bob along pretty well. We didn't have young children come to the house. None of our friends had children. Zero point in fencing it. A couple of years after it became law, the council started doing inspections to make sure that pools were fenced. The guy was a typical council employee. Strutting around in his fiefdom, flexing his muscle and threatening fines and court etc. Dad got some quotes to have it fenced, which were pretty expensive as the hard paving surrounding the pool was curved and the fence couldn't be a typical wooden fence as wood doesn't follow curved contours easily, and the council bylaw wouldn't allow it as little kids, who were non-existent at our house, could climb the fence using the crossmember to get a footing. So, Dad kinda ignored the issue for a while until the council guy came back and again started threatening again and gave Dad 30 days, or something like that, to remedy the issue and sort out the swimming pool. Dad started researching and came up with a solution. The council guy came back 31 days later and was furious that the pool wasn't fenced. Dad took him out to the pool. The approximately 30 feet long and 10 feet wide and 6 feet deep in the shape of a kidney. He showed the council guy the dozen or so fish and water lilies that now occupied the pool, thus turning it into a fish pond. A pond that was the same size and depth as the swimming pool it used to be, which under the law did not, and still doesn't need to be fenced. Game, set, match. Edit. I can see, and in some way agree that it was a bit irresponsible. But as mentioned, the property itself was fully fenced and electric gates at the top of the drive. No kids came to the house. I'm pretty sure if we did have visitors or it was still used as a swimming pool when my brother and I had kids, fencing would have happened. The last story is titled, "Maliciously Complied and Locked My Boss Out of His Own Home." TL, Dr. Manager stopped employees from attending properties after hours, ended up paying $300 for a locksmith because we refused to attend. Edit. I used to work as a property manager for a semi-large company in a small city. Among the usual duties of a PM, we were also responsible for after-hours maintenance calls. Originally, we were paid for 3 hours of overtime to cover the phone calls we answer and paid an additional $80 for any call-outs we have to attend ourselves. The entire team rotated the phone between us, so we only had the emergency phone for one weekend every 2 months. The phone was an after-hours maintenance line for over 800 properties, so you can imagine how busy it would get, but the extra pay helped the blow of losing your weekend. This was not a problem until our boss wanted to crack down on overtime hours, stating, "I very much doubt you're working 3 hours whilst you have the emergency phone." His new rule was for each staff member to document when and who called, and you would be paid an hour of regular time each call. But under no circumstances are you to attend any issues yourself. This includes unlocking doors for tenants who are locked out of their property. He enforced that the tenant must pay for a locksmith to attend and let themselves in. This angered many of our clients and caused us to be constantly abused over the phone by our tenants as they had to pay $300 for a locksmith. This is where the malicious compliance began. We indeed documented all our calls, which instead of paying each employee $100 for 3 hours, he ended up having to pay us $500, or more, each weekend due to the amount of calls we would actually take. But it doesn't stop there. What I should probably mention is that our company can provide accommodation for our more higher staff at a fraction of the cost you would normally pay. The manager in question was in such accommodation, and lo and behold, he managed to lock himself out of his apartment at 11 p.m. on a Friday night. Manager: Hello op. I have locked myself out of my apartment. You need to collect the spare keys and come unlock my door. Op: I am very sorry, manager, but I cannot do that. Manager: Excuse me? Why not? Op: Unfortunately, you have instructed me not to attend to any callouts under any circumstance. I can, however, send you through the number of our preferred locksmith to come let you in? After a few choice words, the manager hung up and phoned a locksmith. Let's just say, after he had to fork out $300 for an after-hours locksmith, he changed our ability to attend callouts. Thank you for listening.